Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a womanist to society.
Then so shall you be.
Hey everybody, welcome back to A Menace to Society. I am stoked about today's guest. She is running to be a representative for the people of New York. Please welcome to the podcast, Lindsey Boylan.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm a Democrat and I'm a mom, and I'm running in New York's 10th congressional district. And I'm going to be the first woman to represent the district in 50 years, which is kind of unbelievable. And I think it's time for a change, and I'm challenging the whole system. So it's a really exciting time to be doing this, particularly when I live in the most unequal district in the country.
Yeah, it's really crazy to imagine that you have so many strong professional women, including a lot of moms right there on the Upper West Side and all over Manhattan. They're not represented by a woman.
No, and not at any level. I mean, from our governor to our mayor to our state senators, state assembly person, we've just been left out of the conversation, and it's reflected in every kind of decision that we've seen. I mean, in terms of paid leave, in terms of minimum wage, in terms of all the things that would really help families, would move the needle forward for women, we've just not been at the table. And yet at the same time, we volunteer. We are the backbone of society, in my view, where we do so much, and it's time for us to have a seat at the table.
Well, I'm all for moms being brought to the table and handed a big old platter.
Absolutely. I would love that.
What are some of the things that you want to change?
Well, I think there are three main areas that I'm really particularly passionate about. As I mentioned earlier, this is the most unequal district in the country. So we have some of the people doing the best. We have people doing very well. Our district includes Wall Street. And then we have people struggling the most. We have people living in public housing that hasn't been invested in for decades. We have a third of our population can barely afford to stay here. And if they have one bad month, if they lose a job or they have an unanticipated medical bill, they've got to leave. And that is incomprehensible in such a blue district, that we aren't dealing with inequality, particularly where, in my view, issues of inequality are driving everything in this country. People are frustrated that the American dream is dying. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I was the one person in my family that I was able to realize her dreams. But when I look at the rest of my family, no one else has been able to get out of the cycles that have been so tough for American families. And it's getting harder and harder to see the way forward. So really dealing with inequality, and the biggest way you deal with that in the city of New York is through issues like housing, and really investing in housing and making it possible for more people to stay here and to thrive here, much more diverse group of people, instead of making it possible for just a small number of people to. The second issue that I'm really focused on is mental health. And I'm really focused on that because I came from a family where 3 generations of women, my grandmother, my aunt who lived with us, and my sister, all lost custody of their kids because of addiction and mental illness. And that's not a rarity, actually. I mean, maybe my family is more extreme, but every family that I hear about has some interaction with mental illness, and our country's just not doing a good enough job at helping people. We have this great conversation around healthcare and Medicare for all, and how we're going to cover more people, but mental health is being lost in that, and I'm not going to let that happen, because we need to help people. We can't have people self-medicating. We can't have people dealing with their struggles alone. And the biggest cause of disability in this country from work, where people are out of work, is because of depression. And no one, realizes that, actually, not just the country, the globe. And then the third issue, besides inequality and mental health, is climate change. This is a district full of coastline, and we're going to be hit again by the next superstorm, and yet we're not dealing with the reality of how the world has changed. You could be living in Texas and dealing with flooding. You could be living in California dealing with forest fires, and you can be living in New York and dealing with waterfront coastal flooding, and all of it is related to climate change. And I've got a 5-year-old, and I'm unwilling to pass this problem onto her without making it better. So between climate change, inequality, and mental health, those are the big ticket items. And I think in any conversation, if we had more women, if we had more moms, we'd be further along in things like paid leave, which contribute to equity. Any of the things that are really important. We just need new people at the table.
I'm in complete agreement that we need new people at the table, because it seems like we have a bunch of people running things who don't kind of care as much as the typical mom.
No, I agree. And they just, their pain points are not the same. I wake up every day and I'm wondering, how am I going to make the world better for my daughter than I experienced it? How am I going to ensure that her generation is better off? And I'm not even just thinking of my daughter. One of the things that I think is a misnomer about trying to be a next generation leader is that I'm only focused on young people. I mean, in this district, you lived in New York, in this community, in this district, 1 in 5 people by the 2030s is going to be a senior citizen, and they're not going to be able to afford to stay here. We don't have nearly enough senior housing. We don't have enough fixed income housing. We don't have enough ways to help people stay here. And that's what makes this city so vibrant and wonderful, is the idea that you interact with people of all different backgrounds, of all different ages. And it's fast becoming a place that very few people can stay and thrive here. And that's actually what you see all over the country. So I feel like this is the kind of place where we have to solve the problems of the country. We have the opportunity to do it. And the guy who's been in office for almost 30 years, he may be a nice enough guy, but he's passed 3 pieces of legislation, 30 years into law. One of those things is naming a building after the guy who died in office so he could get the seat. That's what incumbents do, that kind of stuff. And it's not good enough with the challenges we have. And I think we could use a few more women to change things.
I had no idea that the incumbent has only passed 3 pieces of legislation in 30 years.
Yeah, he's one of the least productive members of Congress when we talk about getting legislation passed into law. And 2 of the pieces of legislation are ceremonial. And it's just, where our world is challenged right now. And we especially in a super blue district like this is, we should be advancing things that people in other areas can't, that don't have the opportunity. This district is always going to elect a Democrat. So if you're a Democrat, you should be ambitious about getting things done that maybe people in other areas can't do, right, politically. And that's not what we've had. We have someone who follows and does what he's told, who supports a whole machine that elects people that look like him. Literally at every level, my daughter and I are represented by a man in politics. And it's just, not like there's anything problematic about that in and of itself, but the table should start to get more diverse, because that's how our country looks, and politics should reflect that.
I'm in total agreement.
You're a comedian, and I sometimes feel like what I'm doing when I go to events is like my set, and sometimes people laugh and sometimes people cry, and you're like, wow, it's like every time you go to a new room, you have to figure out how you're going to reach people. And in that respect, I think comedy is a lot like politics, because it doesn't matter if I'm saying, all the right issues. If I'm not reaching people, if it's not resonating, then I'm not going to be able to be productive. And so I think it's a lot like comedy, actually.
I think you're right about that. You have to be able to read the room. You have to sense what the audience wants. You try to deliver what they're looking for. I did see a clip that you were speaking live, and you kind of got heckled by one of your opponent's henchmen, supporters.
Oh, absolutely.
Fans.
Yeah. It's so funny, because we think about like what prepares us for moments. And I have to say, a lot of times I'm thinking about going into those moments. I'm thinking about 2 things. One is, if this is happening to me, if I'm being somehow mistreated or misunderstood, think what would happen to women like my mom, who had my sister at 16, was a single mother, on food stamps, who didn't have nearly the same opportunities I've had. And it makes me angry. I'm like, well, I got to change this. I've got to highlight people acting that way towards me, because if they're doing it to me with all of my respective opportunities, think about how other women are treated. And that's why I show things like that, because it's unacceptable. I can deal with that, but the system shouldn't work that way. So that's why I share it. And then And then frequently when that kind of stuff happens, which unfortunately it happens all the time, I actually think back to my experience of waitressing throughout my like late teens and early 20s, because you go up to a table and you got to pull it together. Like, you've got to figure out how to deal with whatever is going on in people's lives. And unfortunately, there's probably a lot of, stuff that has nothing to do with me going on in the audience when someone has been asked and sort of coaxed into antagonizing. And I try to just like maintain my calm, and I didn't, I hadn't seen it. I was glad how it worked out. But, it's unfortunate when that kind of stuff happens. And I think it's one of the reasons why women don't run. And if I can some way shed light on that and make light of it by showing it, then so be it, because I want many, many more women to run of different experiences, because I think the world will be much better when we do.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I saw that clip. And if you want some good heckle lines, I'm happy to provide some
I would
free
love
of
that,
charge.
actually.
That's my donation to your campaign. I used to work the Comedy Cellar. I'm good with hecklers. I will toss a bunch of material over to you.
Actually, I would love that. I would really love that. Because people are there waiting. They want a reaction. So you're like, how do I keep going here? How do I just keep it moving? And I would love that. I would love some good comedy, responses.
We will come up with some snapbacks for the Boylan campaign, because that's not okay to be heckled that way and to be treated like that. I had a friend who ran for, she was only running for the state house, and she had a few incidents with the incumbent and their people. So it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think if you're so proud of your record, then you don't need to design all of these systems to make people feel uncomfortable and unwelcome. You don't need to design systems to try and embarrass people or make them feel shame. And unfortunately, so much of our politics still revolve around that. And I found that pretty much daily in my race. My opponent calls my donors, tries to, ask them why they're donating to me. I've had several journalists say, the congressman's office calls us and, grills us on why we had you for an interview or on the radio, or why we did a particular story. And that's just silly. And it also just shows insecurity. And if we can sort of show how wrong that is, then so be it. You've got to turn everything into something that you can learn from. And that's positive, right?
Totally. Absolutely. I really have a lot of respect for the fact that you live in some of the most affluent communities. Those are the people that you will hopefully be representing. They have very, very lucrative positions. They have a lot of social mobility, and yet you are very down to earth. I think your background, coming from a working class family, being the daughter of a veteran, it gives you such a basis of compassion for people.
Oh, I appreciate that. My parents could never have even envisioned the opportunities I would be given. And when I think about that, at first it makes me sad, because I walk through so many doors that no one in my family has. And then I look back and I don't see anyone coming with me. My older niece just graduated from high school, and when she thinks about the world, she doesn't have a lot of hope, and she's this beautiful, brilliant young woman. And, we're working on that, but I think it's such a reflection of what's going on in our society. And it's totally unacceptable to me that we can be raising kids. We can be in a place where so many people are losing hope, or who are missing out on so many opportunities when we as a country are doing so well, and in this district when it as a whole is doing so well. It's unacceptable. And I think when I talk about those things, people are so surprised that they live in a community that's so unequal. It's hard to think about, but no one feels good about that. This is a moment in time where no one feels good about how unequal it is. No one feels good about so many, the idea that if you're from a certain socioeconomic background as a woman in this country, now in this day and age, you're going to live a shorter life than your own mother. That is unacceptable. With all our medical advances, that's totally unacceptable. And that's totally on our culture and on our government. And we can't do that. We can't live that way. We can't stay that way. And I have to say, whatever room I go in, I'm saying the same thing. And people nod. No one feels good about this. And we have to change it. I'm so proud. I'm all in on America. I've been able to do so much with my own life and with my family supporting me, but not enough people are getting that sense of hope. And that is one of the best things about being in America. And we can't let that be the case because people are just losing hope. And even in a super wealthy district like this, we have people, 15% of our people, give or take, are on food stamps in a super quote unquote wealthy district. That is hard to stomach. We have over 100,000 students in New York City who are homeless. Like, we can't have those kinds of problems and consider ourselves successful. That's unacceptable,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's no fun to live in a world where you, by virtue of luck and by virtue of hard work of your parents and just also luck, succeed, and no one that you love succeeds with you. And I'm unwilling to have that. And I think so many of us are. And, that's why we're all doing this in different ways.
So when you're out there on the campaign trail with Vivienne, your daughter, what is the one thing she's hoping will change once Mom gets elected?
She wants to see more. I took her to vote with me in 2016, and I supported Hillary. I wanted to see the first woman president. She's grown up in a generation where she feels like things are equal, but she knows that they haven't been. And she loves when I speak because she's so proud of me. I didn't realize how proud of me she would be when I spoke. And I think she wants to see more women leading things. I'm raising a little feminist, and I didn't realize I was doing it. She wants more women to be able to lead things. And it's that simple. I mean, you still turn on the TV and there aren't a lot of moms leading things, particularly moms. If you look at Congress, women, I think, are something like 25%. But if you think about women who are mothers of younger kids, it's a very small percentage. And I just think we should have more diversity of representation. And she's just a little boss. I mean, I always feel like the next generation is going to grow up and they're just going to be infinitely better than we are. So already I think she pushes me. She's the most outgoing person I've ever met.
Well, I like her. She sounds really cool.
She's great.
And how do we get involved with your campaign? Maybe we don't live in New York, but we want to help you win. Maybe we do live in New York and want to help you win. What do we do in both situations?
Sure. Well, you're already helping so much by having this conversation with me, and I've just enjoyed, getting to know you that way. And people across the country, I have to say, I've been humbled by people either through Twitter or through online who have found out about our campaign and support us. Even a few dollars here and there, it means the world to me, and it helps us. And if people want to get engaged in New York, Lindsey Boylan, Lindsey with an E, Boylan.com. We have all kinds of volunteer opportunities. These next 4.5 months are the critical marathon up until the primary on June 23rd. And we can use all kind of help, volunteering in person, people talking to friends about our campaign, supporting us in any way they can. It's really critical and very, very much appreciated.
And we can find you at lindseyboylan.com.
Yes.
And get involved that way. Before we go, Lindsey, what's something that we should know about you?
People always, they're like, why do you want to be in politics? Why do you want to run for office? And I think there's this impression that if you want to be a politician, you got to sort of have some huge ego. And I've sort of struggled with answering this question myself. And when I was a young kid, when things were going wrong in my own family, challenges, trauma, things, I always thought to myself, someday I'm going to learn enough, grow enough to put myself in a position to change things and make them better. And that has helped me grow and give me hope and sustained me through every kind of moment in my life. I came to New York with $100 in my pocket. I lived in 9 apartments in 10 years. I don't even remember some of the addresses I lived. and this hope of, I'm going to keep learning so I can change the system, is what has been the common thread throughout. And so it's not like, I don't love being the center of attention. What I love is this idea that somehow I could contribute to changing things, in some cases that went wrong in my own family, and helping to make it different, write a different story for people. And there's no more important time to write a different story because of what's happening with extreme inequality, what's happening in the country. The demographics are changing. So I think it's a time of tremendous hope and opportunity, and also really important to get more people at the table.
Thank you so much, Lindsey Boylan. I'm pretty sure that she is a compassionate genius, y'all. I really do hope that she wins. Please connect with her, help her win, support her campaign, lindseyboylan.com, and please connect with me at lisalandry.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. You will know when each new podcast drops every week. Shout out Ari Bear. You were born in New York City. Lindsey is going to be representing our old hood.